In this video, I will try to demystify the two-way data binding in Angular so you will get a solid understanding of how it is really working, and at the end of this video you will be able to create two-way data binding also for your custom component inputs. If you are first time on my channel, my name is Dmitry, and here you can find a lot of advanced Angular tutorials which you can check out later, but now we're getting started and I hope you will learn something new today. Alright, I'm pretty sure you have already worked with two-way data binding in Angular, or at least you have heard about it, and most probably you worked with that in context of Angular forms. So if you build some template-driven forms in your Angular application, you import the forms module into your component or module, and then you can use the ng-model directive that allows you to synchronize value between form and some property in your Angular component. And in order to synchronize this data, it uses two-way data binding. So this exact syntax. So if user type anything inside some fields, I change, and you can see that the value of the property is being changed as well. This is like one direction, and also we can change the value another way around. So by changing the property value, for instance, I can say that this is changed and it should be reflected immediately in the native control like input, as you can see it right now. But what if I tell you that this notation is just a shorter version of the following one? And this longer notation is the same as already familiar to you all input-output communication. When you have some output, then you have some handler that receives the value from this output, and then inside the corresponding property is being updated with this new value. That's it. So this everything, including the handler, is just a longer version of the notation you saw in the beginning of this video. I mean, this one. And if I revert it and start to type anything into the input, you can see that behavior remains the same. Like and subscribe if you didn't know that. Now let's try to figure out what exactly makes this short two-way data binding syntax possible. Well, for that you have to follow one simple convention. There should be an input-output pair where the name of the input can be any string, like ng-model in our case, but the name of the output should have the name of the input plus change suffix. And exactly this naming convention makes two-way data binding possible. And if we quickly check the source code of ng-model directive, and this is exactly the source code of it, there you can find the ng-model input and its corresponding ng-model change output. And this pair makes the two-way data binding possible for ng-model directive. By the way, those things are so-called input aliases. It might be useful when you want to expose the input or output with a name that is different from what is being used inside the component or directive class. But let's get back to the topic. All right, it is clear with ng-model. That doesn't mean that we can implement the same two-way data binding stuff for our custom components and directives. And yes, we can do that. Will we implement it in this video? Yes, we will implement. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention that the sponsor of this video is my Advanced Angular Forms course, and this is one of the most in-depth courses you can find about Angular Forms topic. There, besides the basic things like template-driven forms or reactive forms, we will do a lot of source code investigations, so you will understand in depth how Angular forms are working, and at the end of the course you will be able to build really complex custom form controls, like custom drop-down component that supports multi-selection, option searching, or accessible navigation through the options and selecting them just by pressing enter on your keyboard. And additionally, you will learn how to create forms dynamically from some JSON config, which appropriate architecture to choose for that, and how to optimize it by lazily load dynamic controls. Everything you will learn from this course. Check out video description, links will be there. And now let's proceed and implement two-way data binding for some custom component. All right, first of all, let's maybe remove all this ng model related stuff. So I don't need this module, and I also don't need this handler. So let's remove it. Here we go. Then let me quickly import the component I prepared for this tutorial. And this is just a counter component that increments some value. So we can use it somewhere here. So this is our counter. The source code of it I will show you a little bit later, but if I save it now, you can see that the counter is working and it just counts from 0 and unless the browser window is open. This component has one input called start from, where you can provide any number and it will start to count from this number. As you can see, it started to count from 5. But I don't want to use just hard-coded number. I will be using this input value property. Then I will change the string here to the number 5, for instance, and let's maybe also rename this property to counter value, so it makes more sense. And also input here we will change to counter. Here we go. And I want to implement two-way data binding exactly for this start from property. So let's do that and jump to the counter component. This is how it looks like. This is the input you have seen. And once the component is being initialized, it just increments the start from property and it renders it in its view. So very simple one. And currently pay attention that when the counter component changes the start from property, so it changes its internal state, it is not reflected in the app component for the counter value property. Yeah, you can see the counter value remains the same, but the internal state is being changed right here. Yeah, this is this part. So my goal is to kind of synchronize them both too. So once the internal state here is changing, that should be reflected in the counter value property right here. And in such a way, we will implement two-way data binding for that property. So let's go to the counter and do that. As we already learned, in order to implement two-way data binding for that property, we have to create a corresponding output that matches the property name that needs to support two-way data binding. And in addition to that name, we have to add a suffix change. So I have to create an output like start from change, like that. And it needs to be an event emitter. Here we go. So theoretically, I can change this notation to something like that. And as you can see, no compilation errors or anything else. I can save it, but you can see that I didn't get actually the desired behavior, and the counter value that is printed right here is not synchronized with the internal state of the counter component. So what is the problem here? The problem is that we have to emit the event, the output event, in order to update the parent property right here, right? So we have to do something like that. So I can emit start from change event and provide the current start from value like that. And now if I save it, you can see the values, they were synchronized. And in such a way, we achieve two-way data binding for that property. We can also create something like reset functionality. So after some period of time, let's say after 4 seconds, I will set the counter value back to 0, for instance, and save it. Then you can see that it counts 4 seconds and then it is reset and starts to count again from 0. So as a short recap, we can say that in two-way data binding, the data is just kind of looped. Just remember that there is no magic here. This notation is the same as just a regular input, and also the output that follows some certain name convention, and this output is just updating the corresponding value with the value that arrived from the output, and that's it. But what about use cases? When this two-way data binding might be useful? Well, I will be honest with you, I have never had a need in two-way data binding for my custom components. Yes, I use it a lot with ng model directive because it's very convenient, and also the knowledge about how two-way data binding works helped me to handle some use case with ng model when I had to react on every change from the ng models and then handle the on-change event some specific way I needed. Also, I asked this question people on Twitter, and those are answers I got from them at this moment at least. And thank you all who joined this discussion. I will leave the link to this thread in the video description, so you all can follow and join the conversation or find another use cases that might be useful for your exact application. Otherwise, this is pretty much everything I wanted to mention. Thank you all for watching this video. If you find this video useful, you can share it with your colleagues and friends. Also, leave your thoughts in comments to this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my other social media profiles where I publish different useful tips and tricks in the short format, so you can find a lot of useful information there as well. And I wish you a productive week ahead, stay safe, and see you in the next video.